I've been in the recruitment industry for 30-odd years, 25 to 30 years. And approximately 20 years of that time I was in partnership with my husband in business in the recruitment industry. And we dabbled in other bits and pieces as well. I just felt it was time for a change. So to retire, I sort of didn't call it retiring, but I stepped away from the industry and then just didn't have the encouragement or the desire to go back again. Retiring early took a little bit of thought. There had to be a lot of conversation and thought that went into the process. My first thought, can we afford it? We came to the decision, yes, we could afford it. My second thought was, what am I going to do? I have no idea what I'm going to do. So that's when I went to Claremont Art School. Now, art is something that I've always been interested in. I don't know, painted, been involved in drawing and art since I was a child. I was accepted, when I finished school, I was accepted to undertake a degree at TAFE in fine art, which I deferred, and fell into sales because I needed to earn money to survive. Sort of throughout my life, I sort of have been involved in art as a collector, but also as a, I don't know, a part-time sort of hobbyist painter. Probably more seriously once I left the recruitment industry, and I managed to meet an incredible teacher who is now a friend and a mentor, and he virtually changed my life. Yeah, there was a potential that I may have gone back to work, but having met him, I decided that it was something that I really wanted to pursue because it was a lifelong ambition. But I did say to my husband, we're not going to make a cent out of this, it's just a passion that I want to pursue. So 5 years later, to be in this position where the career, my artistic career is now at launch pad, that's a really nice turnaround. Self-worth, that's what I get out of it. Yeah, and that's very important. I like to achieve. So having the exhibition was a validation that I'm on the right track. And it just cemented, because I was in doubt as to whether my style was something that was going to be accepted. I've got a blank. What is it we call my style, David? Contemporary realism. So I like to paint the realistic side of the bird, but I like to add the contemporary background if I can. So as an artist, I can make my own interpretations. I love birds. I've always loved birds. It's a sense of awareness that I'm trying to portray by my art, because that's my cause, Australian birds.
Nikki's story is just a great story. She was 53 years of age when she retired.
5 years into retirement, and the week before she spoke to us, she'd had her first exhibition and sold 9 paintings. And no wonder when you see the quality of her work.
In this program, we're looking at finances, which is probably the topic that first comes to mind when people think about retirement.
And unfortunately, sometimes finances in retirement can seem like a bit of a guessing game.
But we're going to look at some simple concepts and ideas to start putting the power, money and well-being back in your control.
The whole business of retirement is something that people need to engage with from a pretty early age. One of the things they need to understand is the magic of compound interest. You start with a small amount of money, you add to it, and you add to it, and you add to it, and it grows. Those things aren't properly taught in schools. People don't understand the difference between income and capital. So income is what you earn, and you can earn that from personal exertion, you can earn it from investments. Capital, on the other hand, is real estate, it's possibly investments, and those things grow in value over time as well. So when you get to retirement, it's nice to have several sources of income, some from personal exertion, some from investments, and some that just basically comes in like rent, if you like.
The earlier you start with finances for retirement, the better. The ideal goes something like this. 15 years out, you should begin to look at setting up your finances for retirement. That means putting money aside so that it's there for retirement. This is where a financial planner can help you work out how to best do it, because governments are encouraging people to save for retirement, and there are some taxation benefits if you do things a certain way. And then 3 to 5 years out, you should begin to get rid of debt. Credit card is obvious, but what other debts do you have? Try to get rid of those. 1 year out of retirement, that's the time when hopefully you can sit back and say, okay, how is my money going to come to me in retirement? This is where you work out your money stream, or hopefully money streams. 3 months out, that's the time to begin to check to see if you're eligible for a pension. If you're eligible, then a couple of weeks before retiring, maybe a month before, go sign up for it so that you get your first pension payment on the first pension day after you retire. On the last day, that's the time you say goodbye to the workplace, goodbye to the boss, and your life is all yours.
If you're thinking about retirement when you're 30, it's so far in the future usually and it's not a priority. Usually people, are paying off home loans or funding school education, doing other things that are much more immediate and important. But you can make small steps early around retirement planning at that age. But it becomes a reality once the mortgage is a bit more manageable or paid off, the kids are finishing school and becoming more independent, there's a bit more free cash flow, and then the mind turns to the next thing. And then once you're focusing on that, you can start taking action. So it's a reality.
What's best for you mightn't be best for me. There's no universal best. I dare say you've got to keep on asking questions. You have to educate yourself. I like the concept of a financial mentor. People have in their lives somebody they can go to and talk to about things. It may not be a financial planner, it might be an accountant, it might be a successful business person or someone you know. It's a good idea to have somebody you can bounce things off, because you learn more from people than you do from books. And it's the doing that becomes important.
Sometimes it's helpful just to look back, and I like some statistics that came out a few years back from HSBC, the bank. They'd interviewed 16,000 people from 14 different countries, and they asked them the question, as you look back, what advice would you give people today? And they came up with 5 answers. First was start saving at an early age, don't spend what you don't have, buy your own home, start saving regularly, and develop a financial plan. That list is good advice for any time in life.
Not everyone's in a great financial position, and most people, retirement is a real financial challenge. We only hear about the stories of people who are quite wealthy, and that puts others off. So I'd say don't be discouraged if you have a precarious financial position, or one not as strong as you might have liked. You sort of cut your cloth to suit your needs, and I think it's not being too aspirational or wanting things that are clearly out of touch. So being realistic, focusing on your own situation and not others, I think that helps. It's a mindset of being content with what you have.
People do fear not having enough money, but rightly so, because a lot of people find themselves in that position. But that's partly because they haven't figured out how they want to spend their retirement and how much it's going to cost them. It's not how much money you have, it's how much money you expect to have that determines retirement adjustment. So we find people who are living on a pension and think that they have, more than enough money or just enough money, and then other people earning $200,000 a year in retirement saying they haven't got enough money to live. It's all relative, but it's about matching expectations.
I wish there was a formula. Actually, no, I don't wish there was a formula to work on, because I wouldn't have a job. But I think, no, there isn't really a magic number. So if people don't know what they think they'll be spending in retirement, we might give them a rule of thumb. So it might be 70% of your pre-retirement income. Or if someone had $1 million and they earned 5%, that would be $50,000 a year income. So you can kind of use those metrics to get an understanding of the kind of numbers you might need, but there's really no sort of one-size-fits-all.
There is no formula that you can just put in all the figures and out pops the answer. The way it works is you've got to sit down and start with a budget, work out how much people need to spend. Now, as soon as you start talking about a comfortable retirement, those figures change because, you know, living in rural areas is a lot cheaper than living in the middle of Sydney, for example. So all you can say is there are guides. Now, retirement is different for everybody. It's horses for courses.
Let's face it, most of us want a comfortable retirement. So knowing when we want to retire is really important if planning 10 to 15 years out is the ideal.
And knowing what we want to be doing is just as important to be able to plan how much money we're going to need. But knowing when we want to retire and what we want to be doing isn't going to make money appear in our savings account.
The good thing is, it isn't something that we have to do on our own. There's a suitable set of professionals we can use to give us some advice and help us get on our way.
I think a financial planner can help with honing in on those goals and objectives. So it's not just about money. Look, some planners just do focus on the investments and the money side of things. More and more you'll see financial planners focusing and talking about lifestyle and objectives around quality of life and what you want to do with your time and sort of guiding people through that process. And that's the value I think a planner can add, is just really drawing out and talking about what the lifestyle is going to be in retirement. You know, are you and your partner on the same page? Have you both got the same expectations around what retirement looks like for you? And so those discussions then make it really rich and exciting, and then from there the numbers come out. So a planner can be a guide, I think, in a way.
My argument about finding, for example, a financial planner or a good accountant is you find it the same way as you would find a brain surgeon. Now, if you're looking for a brain surgeon, you don't go to the yellow pages and flick around and, oh, that one lives down the road, I'll go to him. You try and find the best. And you therefore go by referral. You find people who have used them before, know what they're capable of, check their credentials and their standing in the community. Referral has got to be the best way of finding any good professional.
A few years before retirement, Margie and I were searching for a financial advisor, and we didn't really know where to look, so we just started to ask around the workplace, and one name kept coming up. So we rang and made an appointment with this woman. The important thing for us was that she knew her stuff, and she knew what we were talking about, and she seemed to understand where we were coming from. And I think that's important when you're looking for a financial advisor. The icing on the cake was when she rang me about 2 or 3 weeks before retirement, and she said, you need to retire earlier than the end of the year, because in January 1, new deeming laws are coming in. So I retired a couple of weeks earlier than we'd planned, and we discovered later that we would have lost $4,000 a year every year of our retirement. So you can see why I'm a fan of financial planners.
Finances don't have to be really complex to be beneficial to someone. Sometimes if something's really easy to understand, the client in that case embraces it and takes ownership of it. They're not confused. They ask really good questions, and they have the confidence that they're doing the right thing.
And it was kind of fascinating when we got into her office, as she looked through the material we'd given her, as she was assessing it, there was a bit of a pause, and then she looked up at us and she said, you know, you're going to be all right. Now, we were doing this just 5 years out from retirement. Now, I would say to anybody, don't do it just 5 years out, do it much earlier than that, but I've learned that since. And it was kind of that moment of relief where we kind of thought, hey, we're going to be all right. Now, it's also important to know if you're not going to be all right, so you can address it. So either of those things are important, so you know what you can do and what you can't do.
If you don't like the advice you're getting, I think there's a couple of things. It's either a mismatch with the advisor, because it's a personal relationship. It might be that the advisor's just giving you poor advice, It might be something, it might be great advice, but you don't understand it or you're not comfortable with it. So if you don't like the advice you're getting, ask more questions or just go and see another planner. You don't have to just accept something that you've been told.
There are two complaints I sometimes hear about financial planners. The first is that there is a charge. Now, I don't really think that's fair if you go to a financial planner and ask for their counsel and not get a charge, because that's professional advice. But the other one I think is a little more serious, because people complain that they go to a financial advisor and she will say, well, okay, I will now take control of your money. And they say to me, I don't want them to take control of my money. I want to have control, but I want them to tell me what to do. Okay, if you don't want that, you've gone to the wrong financial advisor. But there are others that don't work that way. So my advice is to say, go find a different one if you have a problem with the one you're dealing with.
Well, the reason they want to take control is so they can keep an eye on it, to monitor whether the advice is good and whether it should be changed or not, because they'll become aware of things before you might. So I can understand why there is that push. On the other hand, some people just like a piece of advice here and a piece of advice there. The problem with piecemeal advice is, like, I suppose, if you have a particular medical complaint and you've gone to 5 different doctors and you've picked up a bit of advice here and a bit of advice here and a bit of advice there, and all of a sudden something goes wrong, who do you blame? You can't blame the whole 5 of them. You've got to think logically, I suppose, about how the process works.
I think initially, if you don't want an advisor just to take control of everything, find out at first what that advisor does, like what their specialty is, because some advisors really specialise in investment advice, and from their point of view, they're the ones that will do the best job for the client. So partly they think it's in the client's best interest, partly they do want to have control. So firstly, make sure the advisor you've got's a right fit. If some advisors aren't interested really in managing the money, they just want to give the advice and help you with the strategy. So if you get the right fit to start, that's good. But then if you find the advisor wants to take over everything, once again, if you're not comfortable with that, then you don't have to do it. You see another advisor.
While seeing a financial advisor might be a bit overwhelming, it's certainly better than attempting to follow the advice of a friend or family member who thinks they know what to do. And if the cost is an issue, consider this. It may end up costing you a lot more in what you lose for your retirement if you choose not to have one.
The reality is that one of the most effective ways in helping us plan for an easy retirement is to find the right financial advisor.
Whether we're used to financial strategies or not, one of the biggest investments many of us make is buying a house. It's one of the hardest to pay off, but it's well worth it if you can.
Owning your own home it can be critical to a retirement plan or to anyone, because it's having that housing security. And it's pretty much like one of the basic, Maslow hierarchy of needs is to have security around where you live, and particularly in retirement, because as people age, they can become vulnerable. They're not earning an income, so if they're renting a place and the rent goes up or they need to move, it's expensive, it's unnerving, and they have no control. So if you own your own home, you actually control where you live. You're not going to get evicted. You don't have to find extra money for rent, and it's peace of mind.
Studies have shown over the years that one of the most important things is to own your own home when you get to retirement age. And by owning your own home, I'm also suggesting free of debt. Now, a lot of people these days are getting to retirement age, but they still have debt. And that's a big change that's happened over the last 20 or 30 years. So the home becomes a very, very valuable asset, because you can downsize, you can borrow against it, you can reverse mortgage it and do other things. So I would say owning your own home is one of the key components of a successful retirement.
Unfortunately, there's a growing trend among retirees in Australia and other parts of the world that sees more retirees either renting or still paying off a mortgage when they retire.
The reasons for this range from a lack of finances and planning to family breakdown, but it can mean some hardship, loss of security and uncertainty for many of them.
People going into retirement who don't own their home, it's a growing group cohort and it presents a problem because there's no security of housing for people. And of course the cost of living is higher because you either have to pay rent or if you do have a home and you've got a loan on it, you have to service a loan. The debt, that can be as risky as not owning a house. And I think in the years to come, it's going to be more difficult to hang on to a mortgage once you've retired. And there'll be much more of a demand to pay out debt once you stop work, I think. So try not to have too much debt as you approach retirement. And if you do, then maybe you have the plan to downsize your home. So buy something a bit cheaper and pay out the debt. I think the advice would be to be creative. So one of the things is they'll live in an area, but they can't afford to buy in the area in which they live, but they might be able to afford to buy a property in a different suburb or a different, even a regional area. So maybe think outside the square. You know, the security of owning your own home when you're older and you're not working or earning an income is invaluable. If you can't do that, then be creative, like granny flats. If you've got older children that have a reasonable sized property, you could build a granny flat in the backyard. You could contribute some funds for an extension on a house. You could share with people in similar situations. So you've got share houses for uni students. Why can't you have a share house for retirees? So I think it's being a bit creative around where you live, but sometimes as people get older, they get a bit more set in their ways and new things can be a bit of a challenge. So maybe think about it before you retire about what you might do.
There's no question that finances are important in retirement. Actually, the latest HSBC survey of 18,000 people from 16 nations found that 58% of people are planning to work on in retirement. Now, that's quite a big figure. Now, the statistic is different for different nations. A quarter of people in Britain go back to work after retiring. And in the United States, a third are going back to work after retirement. That's a significant number.
Retiring early took a little bit of thought. It wasn't something that I just said, well, I'm tossing in my career and I'm out of here. We'd been fortunate enough to be involved in running our own businesses and selling businesses to acquire assets in preparation for retirement. So finance, career, your partnership, and how are we going to spend that time together and what are we going to do in retirement to occupy ourselves, and you have to do a little bit of personal analysis as well. You have to stay active. That's really, really important. Not only physically but mentally. So I think they're the four most important things. The first one was finances.
The first step when approaching a successful retirement is the most obvious, finances. But it's more than that. If finances are your whole focus, you've missed something important.
A healthy body and healthy mind is essential for the best in life, in retirement or not.
There's a warning from Princeton University study which looks at middle-aged people, 45 to 65. And what they're finding is that a lot of people in this age group are working longer and harder for retirement, but not really caring about their health or well-being. Now, we understand why they're doing it because they're at the peak of their career, and so they work the harder hours, do the hard yards, thinking that I'll fix my health when I get to retirement. Problem with taking that approach, good to have the extra money, but what if it wrecks your well-being for later and you can't recover in retirement? Let me say again, this whole-of-life approach to retirement is important. That you care for your health, you care for your mental health, your physical health, and also your financial health. But don't overwork on the financial side and lose the other. That would be tragic.
Wealth and health were both equally important, but there's one thing that needs to be said. You don't have to retire simply because you reach retirement age. There's a growing number who plan to work in some way after they could have retired.
This might seem outrageous to those of us who are counting down to that final paycheck, But it can look really different depending on what our wants and needs might be. It's amazing the benefits some of us get from work. The work environment can bring social interaction into our lives, not to mention the health benefits that we gain if our occupation is keeping us active.
It can offer us a sense of fulfillment to be able to contribute to something that we consider worthwhile. These are only a few of the benefits that we can receive to our physical and mental well-being if we choose to continue working. There's also an obvious benefit to our finances as well.
So the benefit of working longer is financially. It means, well, you're earning more money, which means you can either save more towards your retirement, but you're not dipping into your capital. So it means when you do finally retire, you've got that intact. It would have grown a bit. You've possibly added to it. So you've got more money that will last longer. So it's other than personal reasons for working longer, financially, it's just the best thing that you can do. And you don't have to work full time either. You can phase into retirement, like transition into it and go from full-time to part-time to casual, and that's a really good way of working into retirement, I think.
But I come back to my theory about retirement. Why not find something you love doing, do it for as long as you possibly can. Doesn't mean you have to do it every day. Doesn't mean you have to do it every week. You can have work 4 days a week and take the last one off, or you could work 3 weeks of the month and take the last week off. There's lots of ways of getting around those sort of things, but you have to enjoy it. If you're not enjoying it, then I can understand why people, get to an age and look forward to the day when they just effectively jump off a cliff. I'm talking about a different approach to jumping off the cliff. Some people get pushed off the cliff, of course. I'm talking about smoothing the glide path to retirement, which is doing some work still, feeling involved, feeling important about what you're doing, and making a contribution.
The approach we take to retirement needs to be our choice. And the more time we spend in preparation, the clearer it will be. We may choose to jump or glide, but sometimes, unfortunately, we are going to get pushed off that cliff.
What's clear is that there are several important steps we can take to be as ready as we can, whatever the situation is. One of the first is to work on finances as early as possible.
And to get professional help.
But also make sure your financial advisor is qualified and is a good fit for you and what you want.
It also isn't the end of the world if you end up not having as much money as you wanted. You'll just have to build your retirement around the finances you have available to you.
The concept that retirement is a whole-of-life thing is a reminder that it isn't only about money.
And it's important to remember there is always the possibility of working on after you reach retirement age if money is a concern. But you'll only ever do so if you have the health to do it.
Whatever you choose, we hope you'll be able to join us next time when we ask the question, what will you actually do in retirement and how do you work out your options?
See you then.